Okay, so I'll just come to my question about the BDS movement, because that's where a lot of criticism about your position in Palestine is coming from. The last sort of 3 paragraphs of the call for BDS pretty much says, we, representative of Palestinian civil society, call upon international civil society organizations and people of conscience all over the world to impose broad boycotts and implement divestment initiatives against Israel, similar to those applied to South Africa in the apartheid area. We appeal to you to pressure your respective states to impose embargoes and sanctions against Israel. We also invite conscientious Israelis to support this call for the sake of justice and genuine peace. Then there's 3 steps. It's ending the occupation and colonization of Arab lands and dismantling the wall, recognizing the fundamental rights of the Arab Palestinian citizens of Israel to full equality, and respecting, protecting and promoting the rights of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes and property as stipulated in UN Resolution 194. When you read this, it sounds like a call for, self-determination on the part of the Palestinian people.
And destruction of Israel.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, what do you...
furthermore, the hypocrisy rises to heaven. I mean, yes, all of these are the right things to do. It's 100 times worse in the United States, or in England, or in any other country you talk about. Why not boycott? Why not call for that in the United States?
But I think that's a call from the Palestinian people, and if
it's not a call from the Palestinian people, it's a call from groups who call themselves the Palestinian people. I've never seen in fact, it's been hard enough to try to get the Palestinian people to boycott settlement produce. And the very people who are calling for this, are perfectly happy to study in Tel Aviv University. So it's not a call from the Palestinian people.
But it's been signed up.
But even if it were, let's say it were a call from the Palestinian people, if I care about any people, let's say it's the Somali people, if the Somali people issue a call, do I blindly follow it? Or do I ask, is implementing the call going to help them or hurt them? Well, if I care about them, I'm going to ask the second question. Will it help them or hurt them? Now, it's pretty obvious what this call will do. It's a gift to Israeli and U.S. hardliners. I mean, they know perfectly well that there's not going to be an implementation of the right to return. The hypocrisy is so transparent that they just use it as a weapon to discredit the entire movement. And it's happened over and over, incidentally. So yes, if you want to put that, if you really hate the Palestinians, it's a good step, because it's going to harm them, predictably. And in fact, it's already happened. I can give you examples if you like. Actually, long before this movement was started, organized, I was involved in BDS activities, some of them the right kind, which could be helpful. Some of them, which I just got into for reasons of solidarity, for the wrong kind. So, for example, there was one here, right where we are, Harvard and MIT, in 2002, after Jenin. That's, before the BDS movement, this one got organized. And it was a pretty good statement. I thought it had just the right things. But the people who put it together insisted on 3 words, which I thought were a mistake. The words were to the universities, and divest from Israel. Now, there's a reason why that's a mistake, because of the hypocrisy. Why not divest from the United States? First of all, every Israeli crime traces back to the United States, and that's a fragment of U.S. crimes. I mean, they're much worse. People say, I've read, well, Israeli universities don't condemn the occupation. Did Harvard and MIT condemn the invasion of Vietnam? No, they took part in it. They not only didn't condemn it, they directly took part in it. Did anybody call for boycotting them? Are they calling for boycotting them now? And remember, their support for U.S. support for Israel, which is decisive, is a fraction of U.S. crimes. And we can say the same about England and France and on and on. So those particular words could be attacked and were attacked as pure anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, that was with justice. So the president of Harvard immediately picked on them and made an impassioned speech saying, we've got to worry about anti-Semitism at Harvard. Okay, for the next couple of months, the only issue around here was anti-Semitism at Harvard, which doesn't exist. Jenin disappeared, the Palestinians disappeared, and so on. So if you really want to harm the Palestinians, that was a good proposal.
But I think that for having been in Israel-Palestine many times throughout the last few years, I've spoken to people that are not, representatives of Palestinian civil society, they're just Palestinians living in Bilain, Ilan, and they told me, we know it might hurt us. For example, Israeli.
We know what?
We know it might hurt us. Israeli products are better quality. For example,
no, that's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about. If they're talking about what they should do. Now, if they want to take Israeli products, okay, that's their choice. I'm not saying they should or they shouldn't. It is a fact, however, that the Palestinians have not been able to implement a boycott, even on the settlements, let alone on Israeli products. But that's their problem. We're talking about an entirely different question. What should we do? Should we take steps which we have every reason to believe are going to harm the Palestinians? I don't think so. But if people feel like doing that, okay, just join AIPAC and do it straight out. On the other hand, there are very good BDS proposals, very effective ones. I've been in favor of them and, in fact, involved in them for years, even before this alleged movement began. They're ones that make sense. They target the occupation. First, to be a decent tactic, these are tactics, not principles. A tactic has to meet at least two conditions. One, it has to be helpful to the victims, not harmful to them. And two, it has to be educational. That is, it's directed at somebody. It's symbolic, of course, like other nonviolent actions. It's directed at somebody. It's directed at an audience. It has to help educate them, not miseducate them, so that then they'll be able to go on and take further actions. That's the whole point of civil disobedience. Okay, now, there are many proposals that have exactly that effect. So, for example, those that call for, say, an end to U.S. arms sales to Israel has exactly that effect. If symbolic, of course, but if implemented, yes, it would benefit the Palestinians. Two, it educates Americans and Europeans, who are the crucial people here. It educates them because it gets them to focus at home. It's really easy to blame the other guy. Look at those awful people in Darfur and so on. It's a little harder to look into the mirror, but that's what counts. Look into the mirror, find out what we're doing, what we're responsible for, what we can change, always crucial, and particularly crucial here, because what we're doing has a decisive influence on policy. So you want to educate people here to look at home, do the hard thing, and pay attention to what's going on here and try to change it. That's what we can do. Well, if you focus on arms sales, on corporations operating in the occupied territories, on purchase of goods from the occupied territories, and so on, it meets those two criteria. On the other hand, if you say, let's boycott Tel Aviv University, or let's insist on boycotting Israel until they end internal repression, anybody with a brain is just going to laugh. I mean, there's no internal repression in the United States. Do we boycott Harvard, which is a much worse property? So they're just going to laugh, and it's going to be a weapon in the hands of hardliners.
But I agree. But I think it's a pragmatic decision, and it's a lot easier to hurt a small country like Israel through a boycott than to hurt this huge imperial country like the U.S.
No, it's not. It's quite the opposite. It's immediately understood to be just saying, let's go after something that's easy, not after something that's principled. So therefore, it's just hypocrisy, and therefore we reject it, which is exactly what happened, as in the case that I mentioned.
Because the boycott.
And incidentally, if you want to talk about South Africa, let's be serious about it. South Africa, the real boycott movement took off in around 1980. And by the time it took off, that was after decades of educational and organizational work, which had led to a situation in which there was virtually no support for apartheid. I mean, American corporations were beginning to pull out for their own reasons. Congress was beginning to pass sanctions and so on. There's nothing like that going on in this case because the work hasn't been done. So if you want the South African analogy, do the work. Okay, then when you get overwhelming opposition to the Israeli occupation and U.S. support for it, fine, then you can do these things. In fact, there's more to the South African analogy, if people would pay attention to the history. Around 1960, South African nationalists recognized that they're becoming a pariah state. And the foreign minister actually approached the U.S. ambassador and told him, look, we know we're being voted down in the UN and so on and so forth, but you and I know that there's only one vote at the United Nations, yours. It doesn't matter what the world thinks or does, as long as you support us, we're okay. And that's turned out to be exactly correct, exactly. By the 1980s, as I said, even Congress was passing sanctions. Reagan had to get around the congressional sanctions to keep supporting South Africa. He did. As late as 1988, the U.S. denounced the African National Congress as one of the more notorious terrorist groups in the world. Mandela just got off the terrorist list last year. And apartheid was working fine. Looked like they'd won everything. They were gloating in their victory. A year or two later, U.S. policy shifted. A couple of years after that, apartheid was gone. Now that tells you that if you're serious about helping the Palestinians, you'll pay attention to the South African analogy, not mythology about it.
I think the BDS, you call it an alleged movement, before living in Europe and being to the, it's really a movement. And
yes, and what you're missing is that I've always supported it even before it existed, when it was properly targeted. If it's targeted in a way which meets the basic two criteria, helping Palestinians and educational, not only do I support it now, I supported it before it began. If it's, on the other hand, designed to harm Palestinians and to miseducate people, then I'm not in favor of it.
But how could he, because you're saying that it's not coming from the Palestinian, but more and more organizations have signed this call for boycott. I think it's 170 now inside Palestine. There's also a boycott from within, in Israel, from Israel. So how you're actually saying that the Palestinian...
That is just totally irrational. First of all, if Palestinians within... They've tried, the leadership at least, has tried to get them to boycott Israeli settlements and Israeli products. That's fine. That's their business. But if, say, let's take away Palestinians, if Somalis authentically, organized Somalis, put forth a call to me, which I can see is going to harm them, I'm not going to follow it. At least if I care about Somalis. Of course, I don't care about them, I'll follow it.
So let's say if really the call was from every single Palestinian in Israel and in Palestine, you're saying that you want to support them and not harm them, but how would they feel if they say, to support us, could you do these PDFs?
Could you do something which will harm us? What I would do is exactly what I've done for years when I've talked to Palestinian groups who have been pretty self-destructive, I should say. This goes back to the 70s when the PLO was extremely self-destructive. And I met leadership and others with Ed Said and Iqbal Ahmed and other people who cared about the Palestinians. And what we tried to tell them is, look, you're calling for this and you're acting this way, but you're harming the Palestinians. That's what we tried to explain to them. Didn't work very well with the PLO. That was Ed Said's despair and Iqbal Ahmed's. But yeah, that's exactly what you do in any case when you're dealing with oppressed people. I mean, if Black Panthers had said, okay, let's go out and smash all the banks, I wouldn't have said, well, okay, you're the blacks, so therefore I'm going to go smash all the banks. If they had said that, which they didn't, I would have said, look, you're making a mistake. The actions you're calling for are going to harm you, and you should rethink what you're doing. If we care about people, that's the way we react to them. If there are BDS tactics that help the Palestinians and help educate Americans and Europeans, so therefore they will act in ways that matter, of course I'm in favor of it.
Okay. We have to go. Okay. Thanks a lot, Noam.
Yeah.